Hey, we are finally getting to this, the Dreadbox Abyss. I'm going to say overview because this isn't a super thorough on-target review. I would say it's more of an overview. And because I've been busy as hell lately. Taking a class, work, all that stuff, and now that I'm back in the States, I'm just not finding as much time as I had before, which sucks, but so it goes. This actually ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would based on the footage that I took. So I'm breaking it up into two parts, and this is part one. It will be covering the VCO section. Look, a V, I'm not gonna spell it out. The VCO section, the voltage controlled oscillator section, the voltage controlled filter section, and the voltage controlled amplifier section, the VCA. So, and that's all just in part one, and I'll be doing some examples, although probably not as much. Go check out the video I did where I just played the Abyss for 20 minutes or whatever it was. That'll give you a lot of a good idea of how it sounds. There are no effects in this whatsoever. I try to keep it fairly basic for the review. Anyway, as I mentioned, or as I alluded to, I don't excruciatingly demo everything in this. That's why it's more of an overview. So let's just kind of get started. Oh, I am wearing I got this, can you see it? In Reykjavik. It is the Sæta Svinid, something like that, which means sweaty pig in Icelandic. You know, Schwein, Vaken, Nederlands, you know, pigs basically, in that Germanic language. It's related to the word swine. And I am drinking a Fat Tire. It's a decent company here in the States. Belgian style ale. I think they used to call this a dubbel. It's basically like a Belgian dubbel, although it's not as strong. It's an amber ale anyway. And it's pretty good. So anyway, here it is, the Dreadbox Abyss overview. And sit back and relax, enjoy it, learn something about I almost said the F word. A very cool synth. And enjoy. Cheers. Okay, hey, finally we're going to do a sort of overview of the Dreadbox Abyss. Now, if you guys have been watching videos from NAMM or even the Super Booth, you've seen probably 15 different versions of an introduction covering the Dreadbox Abyss. And so what I wanted to do with a little better video resolution and audio resolution is kind of walk through the different parts. Fortunately for me, this is a very kind of well laid out synth. It's mostly one knob per function, and we'll touch on some of the areas where it's not one knob per function. But it's laid out very nice, and I'm having a great time playing with it. As I think you saw from the previous video I did, just doing sound samples from it, twiddling around with it and stuff. I like it a lot, naturally. So anyway, we're going to start with just the traditional synthesizer flow. And by the way, you might hear in the background the air conditioner's running a bit because it's hot here in the United States in July. So ignore that if you can. And if you don't hear it, great. So we're going to start with the VCO, voltage controlled oscillator section. This is awesome. Now, the Abyss is a 4-voice analog synthesizer, and each of those voices has a variable selection of waveform for the oscillator, which is awesome. Also, right off the bat, you have basically an LFO to change the position of which waveform you're selecting. So you can set it right here at square, and then you can change the depth and the rate of an LFO that kind of makes it variable through the square wave towards the saw wave and then towards a pulse width wave. So let's hear that. Now you'll notice as I increase the depth, basically, if you could see this spinning or dialing or moving back and forth, it would be going like this, 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 this. So once I increase the depth fully, it will be going all the way down here, all the way over here. From pulse width to noise square wave, or a noise saw wave, basically. So, as you can hear, you have a pretty big palette of waveforms to choose from, and better yet, they're not static. You can have it fade back and forth between neighboring waveforms. It's almost like an analog wavetable, so very cool. Right now, the filter is wide open, so there are no effects running. This also has 3 effects, and we'll address that later. No reverb, anything like that. So it's strictly just filter wide open with sampling the one oscillator waveform as it sweeps through. Now you can also dial in specific portions of that whole spectrum of waveform. So you can, very much like a normal Murmux, you can dial the depth down to 0. Depth is now 0, so the rate doesn't matter actually. It's set at a perfect square wave for this. Let's hear it. Let's take a look at it. Very much a Dreadbox square wave. So you can also get the standard typical Dreadbox saw wave, which is right about there. Now let's just slowly manually sweep it through and look at the waveforms while we're doing that, okay? So there you have it, kind of the basic core of the voltage-controlled oscillator for the 4-voice analog synthesizer Dreadbox Abyss. Now, this offers 4 of those VCOs with those variable waveforms, and also a sub-oscillator, which is a square wave. Let's hear what it sounds like, bringing in a square wave. And you'll see a little bit later that does add a lot to some of the pad sounds you're going to come up with, or you can come up with, or even the bass or the leads. So it's nice to have. So let's go into a little more detail on the VCO now. We also have glide. So this will let the different voices glide to the next notes. Also works in polyphonic mode. Okay, the glide function sub we already talked about. We already talked about the rate and the depth. You're able to detune the VCOs relative to each other. So let's do a chord. And then we'll slowly increase the VCO detuning. And as you can hear, that's very out of tune. Then you can also apply detuning to the LFOs. So the LFOs are a little out of sync. One goes faster, one goes slower. And this is the LFO feeding the vibrato over here, at least as my experimentation has indicated. Let's go to the vibrato. I'm increasing the rate, and I'm going to increase the depth. Okay, so again, and the rate can get up there quite a bit. In the audible range, although I wouldn't say it's a smooth audible part. So let's try and do an example of, so I'm doing an octave, a D and a D. Let's see how the vibrato works on that. Now you can hear that the vibrato is locked. These are synchronized. That the low D and the high D, or the octave higher D, the vibrato is in sync. Let's detune this. You can hear that they're slightly out of sync now. So anyway, it's a subtle effect, but it's enough that kind of gives it a little more movement. And I read someplace online in one of the forums that I think they adjusted that so it's not as extreme as it was before, at least in one of the early versions. So I think we've adequately covered the VCO. This is the normal Murmux filter, 24 dB, and it sounds great. It's got that kind of ballsy presence, beefy, as I described it way back long ago in the first Murmux review I did. And here's how you control the filter, the cutoff, resonance, and unique to this, I think this is the first time we've had any kind of velocity input on one of the Dreadbox synths. This velocity controller here will let you input how fast the attack is on this ADSR envelope that affects the filter. If you turn it counterclockwise, if you turn it clockwise, it affects how much the velocity, if the velocity affects the total filter amount. So let's go ahead and just keep it in the middle and bring the filter down and check out the ADSR envelope and see how it affects the filter. And this is the level amount. Level controls how much the envelope controls the filter. Oh, and by the way, we are sitting on a square wave. Let's give this some movement. Let's put it halfway between our saw wave. We were sitting on a saw wave. Let's put it halfway between the square wave and the saw wave. Give it a little bit of depth and a little bit slow rate of movement. See if you can hear that. And you can hear this middle form has less lower harmonics. So when it's on the square or the saw, it kind of fills out the bottom a little bit. And because the LFO is kind of changing where it's moving between those positions, it gives it some movement in the content, the harmonic content. Well, that's kind of interesting because I don't even need to bring in the sub, which would be kind of different, I guess, but to get really a little more variety in the harmonic content. Okay, let's add in a little resonance. Okay, for demoing this, let's just keep it on one waveform. So let's try the velocity part. See how that affects it. Now what I've discovered is kind of the best setting, well, the velocity, when it adds filter amount to the envelope setting, it kind of flattens it out a little bit. So the ADSR controls the overall contour of the filter, but again, when you add velocity, it kind of flattens out the contour of the ADSR, and that's kind of hard to explain. Maybe I'll do a graphic for that. Now we're doing full velocity setting to the filter amount. So as you can hear, the setting here is a slow attack, well, mediumly slow attack, slower decay, and then a lower sustain. But if I hit a large velocity or higher velocity note here, you don't hear the sustain drop. You see what the ADSR looks like, the envelope, but you won't hear it go down. It rises to that peak of the filter, and then it doesn't drop again. So again, if this setting is all the way to the right, then it kind of compresses that ADSR setting. So kind of keep it at the 3 o'clock position, and you still have a little bit of decay into the sustain stage. So the last thing in the voltage controlled filter section is the LFO and LFB modulation here. Here we have the two independent LFOs, rate, or LFO-A and LFO-B. I guess you could call it that because here are the settings for rate A and rate B. And for both LFOs you have a selection of a square wave, a saw up, saw down, and a triangle. So let's hear how these affect the filter. That is just rate, or that's just LFO-A with a square wave. Now we're going to add LFO-B, which is a triangle wave affecting the filter. Increasing the rate of LFO-A. Let's add some resonance because that always rocks. Okay, that's most of the voltage controlled filter section. The voltage controlled amplifier, that's fairly simple. Again, attack, decay, sustain, release, envelope for the VCA. Let's see how that sounds. That sounds great. I mean, and that's literally just variable pulse width with a little bit of movement and resonance, low filter cutoff. And again, with a slow attack, slow decay, medium sustain, and a long release. And the last little secret weapon, well, not the last, one of the secret weapons in the arsenal of coolness on this synth is the drive. So let's bring that down. Let's give it a just kind of a block VCA envelope. Crank up the filter a bit. And crank up the drive. Okay, so we've covered the three basic components of a normal synth that we're all sort of familiar with, maybe semi-familiar with. The voltage-controlled oscillator, the voltage-controlled filter, and the voltage-controlled amplifier.